Tim, you spoke about imagining the new normal. Could you elaborate on that for us?
I'd love to do that. It's funny, yesterday when I went to town with Anne, we had to go to a nursery in Ganubi to get some seedlings. And afterwards, well, let's just go and sit on the beach front and look at the sea and drink our coffee and eat our sandwich. And there's a little bench that's right next to the road. They've built a road right up to the sea, which should never have happened. They bulldozed that coastal forest and made a road right on the edge of the beach. But between the road, there's only a little bit of like really degraded soil, and then the rocks and the ocean. And we're sitting there, and in front of us was this beautiful, thriving Chrysanthemoides monilifera shrub growing. And I just think, we've been talking about this establishing food forests and thinking a lot about it and how hard it is for people to imagine working in this different way with nature. And there this plant is saying, well, just look at me. Yeah, you got some very powerful allies if that's what you want to do. And it really is true. I mean, those things will grow anywhere. I've seen them growing there right, like those ones growing right on the edge of the ocean, blasted by all the salt spray and wind and hectic winds, and they thrive. I've seen them growing in the Karoo under really harsh conditions where it freezes and what have you. They're like a pioneer of note, and especially relevant to me because just before I left home, I'd seen a post on Facebook from a friend of mine who's saying, how are your lockdown gardens? Mine was a bit devastated by the wind. And these things just sort of tie together. We've got plants in nature that are willing to help us protect us from the wind. And I've got lots here growing on the farm. Every time I used to go to the beach, I used to just take a few cuttings. They're growing there, right on the edge of the car park at Hugga Hugga where we go. And I just bring 10 or 15 slips every time I went to the beach. And they're growing all over, acting as a marvelous windbreak pioneer. And behind them, things thrive. They don't suffer even if these hectic winds. I've got a lychee tree growing behind some just near where I'm standing right now. And we've had no rain for quite a while. We had hectic winds last week, and this tree is covered with new growth leaves, and they weren't even affected by that wind because of the chrysanthemoides. So if we want to reforest and have food forests, nature is offering us some very powerful tools to do it with. But again, it's something so hard for when we don't know that, and all we have in our imaginations about producing food is agriculture, which is leaving the forest, which is something that happened 10,000 years ago. So it's like a huge thing for humanity now to reimagine the way we farm. And I think it was quite symbolic when we left being hunter gatherers and started agriculture. It was because the women going out collecting the vegetables which would have been growing in forest clearings. That's where the ancestors of all our vegetables that we know that have evolved from that, and we've bred these ones. But they need to be in a clearing in an open space. They need to be protected from the wind, like a forest would have done. But now we've taken them out of the forest. We've made our own permanent clearings, and it's a huge amount of work. I've just seen over the years trying to have a zone one garden, which in effect ecologically is a permanent clearing. We don't want trees there. We want our vegetables growing in full sun, so we keep this open space. And nature's just wanting to recover that with forest. And it's always a battle. You get these weeds succeeding towards trees, and unless you've got a few hours every day to spare and don't mind being in your zone one garden, you can't actually do it. So to try and then do it commercially is just like crazy, but it's all we know. And because we can't really manage to do it, we've resorted to slavery first when we started trying to grow crops like this commercially. And it was something observed. I've just been reading about Humboldt, and he explored South America, and he'd really had quite a radical view of science, especially to understand nature. He was a scientist, but he said just through empirical knowledge alone, we'll never understand nature. We have to go with our feelings. And he went really with love. He loved nature, and he climbed all the mountains and all the volcanoes, and he's peering down active volcanoes. He was like crazy in love with nature. And his observations in South America with the devastation caused by colonial plantation type agriculture, that required slavery to work. They had to enslave the local people. And he could also see, he predicted that it would cause climate change, it would cause degradation, it would cause, the kind of things we're seeing now. And this was 200 years ago, he could see it. So that move from the forest into the open, growing our food, was a huge step we took away from nature. And even if you go to the Christian Jewish Bible, God even said, from now you're going to live by the sweat of your brow. If you're going to, not live in this garden, live in the forest, you're going to make your own. It's going to be a huge amount of work, and it has been. And yet we can't imagine anything different. And yet we've just experienced it, establishing a food forest, how things like this chrysanthemoides just offer themselves. And even the wattle has offered itself as an ally to work with it to move towards forest. And we're getting radical results of trees growing. And we've discovered you actually don't need to water once you've got forest as cover established, because in a forest there's always enough moisture for the plant. And we've been learning these things. So it's my hope that we can pass this on to enough people to actually be able to imagine this and know that that is our future. Thousands of people with small food forests being the backbone of our food production, and not this mass production, which has caused not only the ecological crisis we have, but the kind of pandemic we're going through, which we know is actually ridiculously mild compared to what could happen if we continued, on the path that we're on. So I'm both excited about it, but I'm also daunted that there's many people now, the lockdown sort of getting eased off, and all they can think of is going back to normal, what they thought was normal, and it's abnormal. It's an aberration. It's us moving away from nature. It's literally destroying the earth and now destroying us. I'm just hoping we can really get into our subconsciousness, into our collective consciousness, the idea that we can work with nature and have abundance, and we're experiencing it. I just hope we can get enough people to recognize that, because it's our only future.
Nature as our greatest allies.
Absolutely, not only teacher but allies. It's just waiting there. And Goethe said it, years ago. He helped Humboldt developed this view towards science and nature, because they used to have these great big discussions into the early hours of the morning, and that's where that kind of philosophy. And many of us have quoted Goethe saying that when you take a step, you take a decision and you take that first step, all sorts of events and things just fall into place that you could never imagine. And that's nature waiting in the wings to, hey, yes, we've been dying for you to work with us, and it will. We can thrive, we really can. But it's that moving back to nature that's the essential step that humans need to take in this time of crisis. Otherwise, we go into the abyss.
It's like nature's waiting for us to take that step.
Yep, eager for us to take the step, and so, like rejoicing when we do. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Tim.